In All Angles tonight.
I, Brian Patrick St. George Sykes, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Jamaica.
Acting Chief Justice appointed.
Actions that brings results will determine the assumption of the rule.
Reactions.
In the 55 years of our independence, there has never been a circumstance such as this.
They must provide the tools.
That's All Angles tonight at 8:30, right after primetime news.
Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson-Miller. And a very special welcome to our viewers on onespotmedia.com. Joining us this evening, we have the Attorney General, Marlene Malahoo Fort. Also in studio with us, the President of the Bar Association, Jacqueline Cummings. Now, later on in the program, we'll be joined by Attorney at Law Conrad George, as well as Roger Malcolm, the Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice. Before we get into discussion, though, a lot of people have been saying to us, what exactly is all this about? So let's take a look at that.
I, Brian Patrick St. George Sykes, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Jamaica.
The appointment of a new Chief Justice is usually a pretty tame matter. But this time,
Prime Minister Andrew Holness is in the line of fire this evening for comments made at the swearing-in of Brian.
The opposition People's National Party has joined in the cause of the legal fraternity for the appointment of Justice Brian Sykes as Chief Justice.
Headlines for days. The reason? This statement by Prime Minister Andrew Holness.
Actions that brings results will determine the assumption of the rule.
The reaction was fast and, yes, furious.
The Chief Justice is being asked during the period of his acting to pass some kind of test, which is being set and marked by the Prime Minister. That puts pressure by implication, if not by intention, on the Chief Justice. In the 55 years of our independence, there has never been a circumstance such as this.
If governments in developing countries require the judges to deliver to the public and wish to hold them accountable for so doing, they must provide the tools.
So why the excitement? It relates to two constitutional principles called separation of powers and judicial independence. Let's start with the separation of powers doctrine. There are three branches of government: the legislature, consisting of the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the Governor General as head of state. The legislature makes the laws. Then we have the executive that makes policy and runs the country. All the government agencies fall into this category, headed by the Prime Minister, who is in charge of the cabinet. Finally, there's the judiciary, the judges, who interpret and apply the law. Now, the separation of powers doctrine is not found written down anywhere in our Constitution, but has been accepted by our highest court, the Privy Council, as applying to the Constitution. The doctrine states that each branch of government has its own purposes and powers and should not trespass upon any other branch. Well, that's a doctrine in its purest state. It's most easily seen in a country like the United States, where the president, the head of the executive, and his cabinet do not sit in the legislature. For us, it's a little more tricky. That's because in parliamentary democracies like ours, the cabinet, which runs the executive, comes from the legislature. In other words, cabinet ministers are drawn from members of the House of Representatives and the Senate, so the doctrine operates only partially. The major focus is therefore on the judiciary, and it's regarded as unacceptable for either the executive or the legislature to try to interfere with the judiciary. This is tied up with the doctrine of judicial independence. Judges are to be free to perform their functions without interference or outside pressure. These functions include both judicial matters, that is, rulings on matters brought before the court, and administrative matters that relate to the judicial functions. The principles of judicial independence have been stated and accepted by courts all across the world and by all kinds of organizations such as the Commonwealth and the United Nations. Which brings us back to the Prime Minister's appointment of Justice Sykes as an acting Chief Justice, because under the Constitution, it is the Prime Minister who recommends the appointment of the Chief Justice. Section 98(1) says, the Chief Justice shall be appointed by the Governor-General on the recommendation of the Prime Minister after consultation with the Leader of the Opposition. But Justice Sykes was appointed under Section 99(1), which says if the office of Chief Justice is vacant or if the Chief Justice is for any reason unable to perform the functions of his office, then until a person has been appointed to that office and assumed its functions, or until the Chief Justice has resumed those functions, they shall be performed by such other person as the Governor-General, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, may appoint for that purpose. So, if the Constitution provides for the appointment of an acting Chief Justice, what's all the fuss about? And that brings us to our guests in studio. And I will start by throwing that question to the president of JAMBAR, the Jamaica Bar Association, which sent out a statement expressing concern about the appointment of the acting Chief Justice and saying that the Prime Minister's statement about action bringing results trespasses on the Chief Justice's autonomy. So, Jacqueline Cummins, what's all the fuss about?
The fuss about is because, as you said in your clip and your explanation to the nation at the commencement of the program, there is a doctrine of separation of powers that we adhere to. And that separation of powers means that the Prime Minister, and I'll break it down so Jamaicans can understand. Cricket match. You have two sides to a cricket match. There's an umpire. That umpire has to be impartial. That umpire cannot be someone who is for the batting side or the bowling side. That umpire is the one to determine the rules of the game of cricket and whether or not a person has been declared LBW or otherwise. What we are saying is that our Chief Justice and our judges are our umpires. They are the ones that determine whether or not our government and the persons in Jamaica are obeying the laws of Jamaica. They're the ones. So they must be impartial and independent. Because of our system of governance, when it is that we go to an election, we determine who's the Prime Minister. We don't have the luxury of determining who's the Chief Justice, nor the Governor-General. That goes to the Prime Minister because he's elected by us. He is the person that we go to the polls every 4 years or 5 years and elect to be the person to be in charge of governing our country. That privilege now rests with the Prime Minister to determine who is to be the Governor-General and who is to be the Chief Justice, the other two branches of government. Once he appoints the Governor-General, he's to leave him alone or her alone to do their job. Once he appoints the Chief Justice, he's to leave him or her alone to do their job, and never the twain shall meet. He is not to advise them or to guide them in any which way. So what we want is an umpire that is impartial, and once the umpire is appointed to start the game, he must complete the entire game and cannot, in the middle of an innings, one captain of one team says, no, I don't agree with that LBW decision, change umpire. That is the problem that we're having, and why the contention is that someone to act as Chief Justice when there's a clear vacancies cannot be the proper way to govern a country.
Just before I ask Madam AG to respond, though, what seems to be missing from your explanation is, as I said in the introduction, and that people who support Mr. Holness's position have said the Constitution provides for this. So to use your analogy, the rules of the game in this particular instance seem to allow it. So
I disagree that the rules provide for it. If in the middle of a cricket game, the umpire gets hurt or the umpire falls ill, the rules provide for somebody else to step up to continue to umpire that game. And it's not the captain of either team who determines when that happens. It is just the rule, the way in which the rules are written. Our Constitution is written in a similar fashion. So in case, God forbid, Chief Justice meets their demise, or Chief Justice becomes ill, or goes on a long vacation leave. The Constitution provides how the person's job is to be continued until you appoint somebody else, or until that person comes back to their job.
Madam Chief Justice, you know, we won't even go there. We won't even go there. But Madam AG, how then could this have been done by the government?
Mrs. Jackson-Miller, good night to your viewers. You ask what the fuss is all about. The way I hear it is that people believe that this acting appointment is supposed to be holding space for me to assume the role. So let me put this matter to rest.
You know, there was no Freudian slip on
Let me put this matter to rest right now. I am serving as a legislator and also in the executive branch as Attorney General. I do believe in term limits, but this is where I am. There is no holding of any space for Marlene Malahoo Fort to fill. So all those who are getting antsy and are wondering whether that is what the real issue is, because I've listened and I have probed. And this is what some persons have said to me. I don't know if there will be sufficient candor and frankness in this, but let me just take the point in limine, regardless of your Freudian slip, and just put the issue to rest. I am here and I am in the executive and legislative branches of government.
Since you've gone down that particular road,
so
let me ask you just to make it clear,
yes.
Because what you're saying is that this acting appointment is not being done to facilitate you, but are you saying that you wouldn't take the job if it were offered to you?
Hold on, you tell me, who does not aspire to the highest level? Come on, let's cut all of the nonsense. Right now, that's not where my interest is. But of course, if I were in the judiciary and it came to that and I could discharge the functions and confidence is reposed in me, absolutely.
Were you offered the job?
No, the issue did not arise.
At all?
The issue
was never discussed with you?
The issue did not arise. And this is why I believe, based on what I have been told, that is part of the real fuss, and other things have now become proxy
Hold
issues.
that thought for me. Have to
That's
go
what
to the
I
break.
gather.
We'll come back and pick up. You're watching All Angles. Remember our hashtag, it's TVJ All Angles. Soon come.